life and confidence coach Dianna Leeder, and this is my podcast, the Crave More Life Roadshow. It's here we talk about emotional hits and lovingly kicking our own asses to get through them. Just so you know, it always comes down to being your beautiful, sassy self, living and loving from you, no matter what. So join me to hear about the healing journeys of other women, and you just might become a DIY ass kicker too. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Roadshow. This is another interview with the Men of the Men's book with Hawaiian healer James Kealiipiilani. You will recognize James, he's been on the show lots, and I'm very, very happy he's back. You'll find his full bio in the show notes. Okay, hey everybody. Today will be a lesson in managing life and experiencing transcendence with my guest, James Kealiipiilani. Give me just a sec, James. There we go. Okay, sorry. That's one of those tech issues, but I think I have it under control. Yes, James Kealiipiilani is my guest, and I'm really, really honored that he's here, and he'll be sharing about the role of healing, letting go, and forgiveness. That's all in his really juicy, amazingly written chapter. I'm Dianna Leeder, host of the Crave More Life Roadshow podcast. I'm an intuitive life coach and hack who helps people get what they want when they find their voice. I'm also the very proud lead author of the Find Your Voice, Save Your Life book series, including the award-winning Powerful Healer Spiritual Stories and the men's book that we've all been waiting for. Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 4, Transcendent Men, Real Stories. The men's book is set to publish in less than a week now. If you're listening to this, chances are you'll be able to find it on Amazon. If not today, within a few days. And you're definitely going to want to look for it because it is amazing. So James is one of my good friends, and I truly, again, I'll say I'm honored that he's here to talk about the chapter. I'm honored that he's in this book at all. Oh my goodness. You recall that he's a Hawaiian healer committed to helping people live positive, passionate, and pain-free lives. He also helps people experience freedom, hope, and clarity in their lives, which he has done as a contributing author to this book. His chapter is called Redefining Harold, Searching for Truth, Identity, and Redemption. I'm honored and excited again to talk with James about our book, which he actually has been a real driving force behind as well, his chapter and Transcendence. So welcome back, my friend.
I just love talking with you, so I'm grateful to be here.
Oh, just pop on.
That's pretty much how it works. And you say let's do this, and I say yes. So here I am.
Awesome, and I love that. Thank you. Okay, so let's start with transcendence. Like outside of your own experience, if you had a client come and say, James, what is transcendence? What would you tell them?
When you ask me that question, the first thing that comes is I see stairways. So I see a stairway. And so transcendence is this process. And the process of transcendence for me is learning about myself, how I move to the world, but how I fit into the world and how I share what I have or who I am with the world. And so I think it's that process. And part of transcendence, is transformation. Part of transcendence is also self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. The way that I explain that is that there's a space between what happens and how I react. And the more space I create between those two is that self-awareness, is that transcendence, because now I'm aware of what I'm doing. Because most of our scientists have proven that by the time we're in our mid-30s, we go through our day and 90% of our day is automatic reaction to things that are happening around us. So we're reacting automatically to things that are happening, but most of us are not aware of it. It's one of the things I do sometimes when I hear people talking is I actually stop and I say, so you're actually saying that this is this and this, and they kind of go, I didn't say that. I say, well, yes, you did. And that's the level of not being aware, because we're talking and we're doing things, but not really being aware. And or we don't do this now because everybody works from home, but when you are commuting you know, the days when you would show up in the driveway and you would realize, oh, wow, I'm home, and you don't remember how you got there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So transcendence is this space, I guess, of awareness, of being really paying more attention to how I go through my day, but how I am consciously choosing to live my life.
Yeah. Wow. Awareness is one of my favorite words. It is. I mean, and you know this, that's why these books are in play. All of them. You know.
It's why we came together to create this book. It's why when you said yes, and Scott called me last year and he said, hey, I'm doing this, and I didn't even wait for him to finish the sentence, and I said, I'm in. You know, most of my clients are women, so to have this opportunity to talk to men about what we go through, I jumped on it. I jumped on it so much. You know, I look at how many people I invited to write in this book. I just said that, you know, because I knew their stories, and I knew that their stories would be powerful.
Yeah.
You know?
And they are. And yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. You really were a driving force behind this book. No question about it. And I really appreciate that, because it is about the story. All these books are about the stories, right? It's the essence of, you know, what was not, what life was like before that awareness was created, you know, and
Yeah.
getting over that into that transcendence.
I mean, that, you know, even the cover is that idea of that, because the cover is by this really dear friend of mine named Guy Kilchrist that lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and until about 8 months ago, we hadn't talked to each other for almost 40 years. But there was a bond between us, and he actually went looking for me, and we got together, and the more I talked to Guy, and I know we're going off subject, but
No worries.
you know, we we have been living in some ways parallel universes, because we're in the same place in our lives, because we're looking at what is the impact that I'm making, and how do I show up in the world from different places, because he has a place where he comes from a very Christian Catholic background, and from me, from this place of being an indigenous healer, and yet we're talking the same thing. And so that connection of that, and then him coming in and even designing the cover and everything else like that, so like all of that was just so amazing, the way it showed up, you know.
Yeah, meant to be, absolutely meant to be, and guided through the whole thing. I have no
Yeah.
doubt about that at all. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a pretty cool cover. I like it a lot. Yeah, and that whole dance, right? It's
Yeah.
when we're trying to do our own healing, there is that dance. You know, you have to meet those shadows and come out of it on the other side, or, you know, holding hands, whatever, you know, whatever you're led to do.
I think that's a good point that you're talking about, is the shadow, because sometimes I think in the, I'm going to call it the new age world, and that's a broad picture, a broad stroke that I'm painting right now, but in that self-awareness, self-change, transformation world that we're in, right? There's that place of not looking at the shadow. Because we talk about peace, love, and light, and we want to be peace, love, and light, but then when the hard stuff shows up, the sometimes what I see is people go, I'm not going to look at that, I'm just going to peace, love, and light, peace, love, and light, peace, love, and light, and not pay attention to those dark places. And the reality is that the dark places are part of you, and the dark places are places that we and I don't say need to often, but I'm going to say it here. We need to look at those, because that's part of our transcendence. That's part of our transformation, is coming to terms with that, not ignoring it. And I think every story in this book talked about the shadow and the dark night of the soul in some way or another. You know, my chapter included, but I'm talking as a collective. That's a conversation that I don't think we have enough as men, because we were taught to hide all of that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Earlier on when you were talking about not being completely aware when you're doing the drive home, or, just kind of automatically responding in a certain way, that's what it made me think about, was all the things that we are told as women as well, but, all the things that the men in the book were told that they needed to be and they should be and they had to be, and how much courage it actually took to have that dance with the shadows so that they could move forward. That was amazing.
it, we are looking at the place where it's important for us to start breaking the stereotypes. And that was a stereotype that's firmly, and that is a stereotype that still is, unfortunately, firmly embedded inside of our awareness, inside of our collective. And so even to stand up and do what we're doing is against the grain of all of that, if you want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree, and it's a good challenge. When I think about, my work has been with women for a very long time, and I've done some very, very strong advocacy around physical assault, sexual assault. The far end of the negative side of life, of their experience, of men's experience. And in thinking about this book and thinking about the benefit to women as well as men, it's going to be healing for men, absolutely no question. But the benefit for women then is also, the opportunity to see what the possibilities are.
I don't think this book is just for men. And I think that, and I've already had a few people that have read the chapter have come back to me, and it says, this is going to help me understand the men in my life in a different way. And I think that's powerful, just as powerful, and it wasn't what the intent was initially, yet having that understanding of that, I think, is really important as well.
Yeah. Me too. Because I think ultimately, and this is just my little take, but ultimately we have to come together and, to do things like, create some of the even, broader societal and political change that will allow us to not listen to some of those old gender-based messages about who we need to be. Yeah.
The other part of this is that I'm hoping that it changes how we relate to each other. You and I, just before we came out, we were talking about relationship, right? And one of my hopes for this book is that it changes the way men and women are in relationship to each other, because we have a deeper understanding of each other in that way.
Yeah.
Women are good about talking about what's going on for them, better than we are as men to talk about that. And again, that's the stereotypes.
Yes.
that we've been trained to embody. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's accurate for sure. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your story in the chapter.
If everybody's wondering who Harold is, Harold's my stepfather. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that was a word that came up for me when I was preparing for today. When I was thinking about all the amazing things you do. One of the things that you have done or still do, I suppose, in whatever way, is that you're a son. That just kept coming back to me, that you are a son. Yeah. Anyway, please go ahead.
No, it's okay. And you're right, and a son in lots of different regards, because the story that I wrote about is growing up in a family where I was not the son of my father. So I was the stepson. I'm the oldest of 8. And my 7 brothers and sisters, Harold, my stepfather, is their father. Right? He's passed now, but was their father. And I came from a different relationship that my mother had prior to her marrying him. And so there was a part of me of always not feeling like I fit in. And there was a reason for that too, because Harold, I don't know if there was animosity, because we never had the chance to have that conversation, but I was always felt like I was treated differently than everybody else. There was a different standard that I was held to. And there was some really tough and hard times in my childhood, as far as not only just physical abuse, but the psychological, emotional abuse as well. And that's really what the chapter was about watching how that formed my personality, that formed who I was. And the process then of realizing that I didn't want to be that person anymore, and then the transformation of coming into a different awareness. And so that's really, in a nutshell, what the chapter is about. And that idea of transcendence for me was that changing that. And there was one part in the book where I wrote and I said, Harold had not been in my life for a really long time, but he was still in my head. And so it was that idea of, how do I get him out of my head? In other words, how do I let go of the things that he taught me about myself that I realized I didn't like? And I realized that were hurting me in my life, because it always affected the decisions that I was making.
Right. So that was kind of the automatic response.
It was the automatic, and we all go through that because we are who we're taught to be, plain and simple. People may argue that, but really we are.
Yeah,
we learn through the primary role models that we have in our lives. He was a primary role model, and what he said about me, I believed. There's no way about it. It's you can look at it like this, and I've never said this before, and this might be really controversial, but it's like slow brainwashing. It's a brainwash, because what they're doing is they're telling, our parents tell us who we should be, what we should be. There's very few people that I talked to where the parents said, hey, listen, you got all the room in the world to figure out who you are. That is not a conversation that I have with a lot of people.
Yeah.
The pressure of success, the pressure of being this, and there's different sects of people, because I talk to people that are children of immigrants, just as an example. And that drive to be successful is really deep inside of them because of where they came and the sacrifices and everything else like that. So, but the point is that we hear who we are through the interactions that we have with those people. And by the time we're 5 or 6 years old, our personalities are pretty much set. And the rest of our lives is reacting or constantly replaying or recreating those first few years. And my story reflected that, because it was the choices that I was making were those choices based on hearing or remembering that I'm not good enough, and you're never going to be anything. And whatever, all the stories or all the affirmations, I guess that was what it was. He was teaching me affirmations. They were not good affirmations. They were not good affirmations, but that's what he was teaching me.
Yeah. I totally get that. And I think it is a kind of brainwashing for sure. We are, as kids, we are, our parents are number one. So what they tell us is going to be there. Absolutely. Good or bad or indifferent. Yeah. It's I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish what you're going to say.
I was just going to say it's a little scary on one hand, because there's a lot of responsibility in being a parent, but it's good. It's a great opportunity. It's an opportunity to help your child be themselves.
I have that conversation with my daughter all the time, where I go back and I say, I'm really sorry I did some of the things that I did when you were a child, because I can see now that I wasn't giving you the space or allowing you to create who you wanted to be. And she and I have had those conversations. So I'm really grateful that I have that, I have the opportunity to do that. Yeah. But it's that, it really is that idea of, I don't know, Harold was very very influential. But then there's something that I talk about at the end of the chapter is some of the things, and I say it, some of the things that were my survival strategies are actually things that I use every day. So part of the healing process in the transcendence was to go back and look and say, okay, wait a minute, this might have been really tough, but what did I learn? And the things that I learned were really powerful.
Yeah. Including the things that you didn't like, right? To have some clarity, because so much of this for me is about when, whatever it is that we're taught to do and be, we respond to that. And then at some point, there is that, and that, whether it's the universal nudge or whatever it is, the spiritual nudge that brings stuff up for us and makes us realize that we have to figure this out. It's that dancing with the shadow kind of thing. We have to figure this out. But then, and that's kind of my concept of transcendence, is when you are past that. And I'm saying that because I want to point out something that you talk about in your chapter that I just found beautiful, and I think is a real lesson for people. Not only did you recognize who you wanted to be and how you wanted to show up, you showed up like that. I'm still touched by that, touching the hand of Harold, telling him that you loved him like that. I have to say that brought tears to my eyes, because that to me is pure transcendence. You showed up as the man that you wanted to be. It's amazing.
It was that place where I realized that I didn't need to have that. I wanted to change the relationship, and the responsibility fell on me, but I chose to change the relationship. And so it was changing that relationship in that way.
Yeah.
And not expecting the reaction that I got.
Right. That was a blessing.
it was a blessing.
Yeah.
It really was a blessing. And you were talking about the shadows, and I want to go back to that just really quickly, because if we're not able to, and this is a place where sometimes we actually need help stepping into that shadow space. And I talk about that in the chapter, is about finding a teacher that helped me look at all of this in a way that helped me walk through it. And I think part of the transformation that we're going through is realizing sometimes that we need help to move through some of those dark spaces. Because if we don't, then what we're going to do is we're just going to keep creating distraction in our life. And the distraction just takes us away from it so that we don't look at it.
Right.
So.
Right. And then it just sits inside us, right?
Unresolved. And then we pass it on to our children, and they pass it on to their children, which is part of the work that I do, is looking at how those kinds of trauma goes from generation to generation. I didn't talk about that very much in this chapter, but it's part of the work that I do,
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So listeners, pay attention to that, because James has he's done his work, he's walked the talk, and now he's offering what he knows, which is incredible, absolutely incredible. So thank you for that offering, James. I wanted to ask you.
Well, I'm going to jump in. I'm sorry. I'm going to jump in here because it's not just reaching out to me for help. It's realizing that we need to reach out in general to help, to find someone else to guide us through that. If it's me, great, but that's not the point. The point is realizing that having somebody there to guide you, hold your hand, be that person as you go through this transformation is and can be really important. You do that too. You help people do the same thing. So it's, we're all here to I look at it this way. And as a teacher said this, one of my mentors said this to me years ago. She said, we're all on a ladder. You're climbing a ladder, and there's a person above you is reaching up going, here, let me help you. And I'm doing the same thing to the person behind me going, hey, here I am, let me help you. Right. And so in that way, we're all in this journey together.
I love that. The ladder. Yeah. Yeah, that's come up more than once today. That's a good I have to remember that one.
And believe me, I have my go-to people too. When I'm deep inside of that, there are people that I reach out to because I don't have all the answers, and there's no way that we can see what's going on inside of us objectively sometimes.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. If we have whatever we realize, whatever our awareness is at that particular point in time, and growth means we need to expand a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Yeah. So if anybody can offer that to us, yeah, I do the same. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to ask you something about, and I think maybe you've answered it a little bit, but one of the things that I wanted to ask you was if you, as a healer, in doing this work, do you hold your, does your transcendence change any? Or, would it be a different experience for you? And maybe it's the spiritual piece. I'm not sure, but that was one of the questions I was called to ask you. So if it
Okay.
means anything to you, bring it back.
I think there's a danger when we think that we've grown and we know everything and we've grown enough. For me personally, I believe that this is a journey that's a lifelong journey of deeper and deeper and deeper awarenesses and understandings, right? What we're doing is looking for those patterns that we keep running so that they can become aware, especially if they're patterns that create negative responses or negative reactions in our world, in our lives. Is can I be open enough to look at those so that I can really get the answer of what that is and understand how they were created, those patterns or those behaviors were created, and how I have been sitting inside of them. And then how do I learn to shift? Because that's really what we're doing. One of the ways I look at this is that we're constantly looking at old patterns, especially if they're negative patterns. And what we're doing is we're breaking them down as we're building new patterns. And that's where it could be really challenging sometimes because we're doing both at the same time. You don't just stop doing whatever you were doing and then start doing the new thing. That it very rarely does it work that way. What we're doing is we're breaking down, and there's a science to all of this because inside of your head, what we're doing is we're creating new synaptic connections and new neural connectors. And so we're breaking down in that way the way that we've been thinking as we come up with another way of being. And that's a process that continues. The brain's not static. Our brains are not static. So our ability to learn is lifelong. And if we get to this point and says, well, I'm too old to learn, or whatever the story or the excuses that we make, I think there's a danger in that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm curious about the very best thing that you now either embody or you choose as behaviors, but the very best thing that transcendence has offered you.
It's funny you asked that question, and the first thing that comes to my mind was something that I wrote in another collaboration that I did last year, and the idea of that is that we are all sacred. And so can I see the sacredness of who I am as I move through my world, and to see the sacred in other people or other things or places that we go to, right? And so for me, part of that transcendence is to realize that there's, something really silly. So I think that would be silly because most people wouldn't look at it like this. But I was driving home from, really quick side story. I was introduced to this 94-year-old elder last year who has, and he isn't, I would say he's a retired healer. He doesn't do the work anymore. He's just living his life, and he's 94 years old. And I met him, and he's taken a shine to me, so much so that he adopted me in the Native American way and gave me and said that you're my son now. But I was driving home from his house. I sit with him, and I was given this responsibility of telling his story. So I've been going to see him every week for about the last 6 months, and I started recording his stories, so that, and we're going to write a book together, and the book may be way past when he leaves. He says he told me he had 2 more years to live, and I said, okay, well, I'm gonna get as many stories out of you, because he's had an amazing life. So, but the point is, I was driving home from seeing him yesterday, and it's raining, and anytime it rains in the desert, it's like, yay, celebration. But I stopped on the side of the road and I took a picture of the rain because it was so beautiful, right? But most people don't do that in their days, where they stop and they see the things that are happening around them. It's that it's that point of looking at something and going, oh my God, how amazing. Just looking at a flower, or looking at a sunset, or watching how rain comes out of the clouds, because it was beautiful. There was all these different colors of gray, and yet these strands of rain coming down, and it was, about 2 miles away, but it was just so gorgeous. I had to stop and take a picture of it, because I was like, oh my God, I'm so in gratitude. There's this sacredness of rain. And like I said, most people don't think that way. So, but it was those moments where we stop and we realize, we are just this thing inside of all of this. And we look, and I think sometimes we see it the other way, that we are here and all of this is there to serve me, but that's not the way that it's supposed to be. It's realizing that I am a part of all of this, and in some ways that's a very indigenous way of thinking. And that's what he was talking to me about yesterday. It was this idea of possessing things that are really not ours. And, we are more stewards. We're taking care of things.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry about the tangent.
No, I love it. And yes, I really do love it, because I feel the same way. We are stewards of all of it. The earth, the water, the rain, it's, we get to, and we get to, if we sit back, we get to do things like stop and take pictures of things that someone might say, oh, that's a little weird, but it's not at all. It's being in that moment, being appreciative, being grateful, and loving what's around you. Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's just that appreciation, and my family knew I was weird from a really long time ago, and people think I'm weird anyway. And I've gotten accustomed to that. So
yeah. Well, you know what? If that's the weirdest thing you do, James, I think you're okay. Yeah. I'm not going to talk about some weirder things that I have done, so we'll just leave that. You get a podcast, I'll get on, I'll tell you that. Okay, so I have one last question for you, and that is, what is your wildest hope and dream for this book?
my wildest hope and dream is that it lands in the people's hands that need to. That's not the wildest dream, but that the men in this book have the opportunity to share their stories on in some ways larger and larger stages, because listening to the stories and bringing those, we teach to the stories that we tell, and the more we can tell that story, the more opportunity we have for other people to step in and allow themselves to go through that journey. So like the wildest thing would be like, not that I want to be on Oprah or anything else like that, but there's a place inside where it brings that much recognition to the stories and the lessons, or the ideas that we're promoting, that we've talked about through all of our personal journeys, that it creates, I don't know, it creates a wave in some ways, that a ripple that goes through, that touches more and more and more people, and we're not in some ways, we're not the first people to do this, but I don't know if there's ever been a collaboration like this of so many people coming together with the same purpose. There's lots of books that men have written on awareness and their journeys and everything else like that. But this is a place, the first time I think I know of, and I might be wrong, that there's been this collaboration of this and this focus intention, because that's really what this is, a focus intention of going, hey, here are different examples of how we dealt with what we went through in our lives.
Right, right. And you know what? I think that focused intention is what is going to lead the book and those messages to go even farther. I don't think that we're done as a group. I don't think that the message is done or messages are done. No. I think that there is lots left to do to promote men just simply being themselves, true to themselves.
Each of the authors in this book are way showers. And so we are way showers in our communities. And so now we have the opportunity to expand that community so that we can show that, be way showers for more people.
Yeah. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. And if you end up on Oprah, just give me a call. I'll be in the front row, okay? I think you will. One day you will. Thank you. Thank you, James. This has been great. I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing all about you. I think it's amazing. And your participation again in this book has been, it's not just the chapter, it's the messages that you live, that you share all the time, that is so, so valuable. It's, you were such a driving force. And, back to what you said earlier, we had guys saying when we said, why are you interested in this book? Well, because James told me to. So and that's not a reflection of somebody just doing as they're told. That's a reflection of your strength and of conviction and your influence, which is awesome. So yeah, we really appreciate that, because it's, the more we're talking about this stuff, the better. And and we're not done. Yeah.
We're not done. And I just like hanging out with you. So.
Okay, well then we'll do it again. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So listeners, thank you for being here too. And we've had a great time talking to James. Go and look for the book, please. I think you're going to absolutely love it. And once again, just by being here, you have kicked your own ass. So thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
If you like today's podcast, hit subscribe at the bottom on your way out, and come find me at cravemorelife.com for even more DIY ass kicking.